Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging with us with a little bit of technical difficulty. I am Joyce Mueller from XanEdu, and I'm joined by Dr. Amy Baldwin. And we are going to jump right back into our content about support for struggling students, because I know that's what we all want to hear about today. So Amy, why don't you keep going with where you are, and we can blow through the XanEdu slides and get to the content.
Yeah, and I just want to say this is almost like support for struggling people with technology. So we were struggling today. Your students are struggling, and I'm going to probably say faculty and advisors and staff are struggling because it is that time of year. So what a joy. We're going to get into that in just a second. For those of you who haven't been on a webinar with us, where I've been co-presenting or presenting with OpenStax, I'll share briefly. I am Amy Baldwin. I'm a senior lecturer of academic success and literacy, and I'm at the University of Central Arkansas. So shout out to all my Arkansas folks that I know are on the webinar. I'm also the lead author of the College Success series through OpenStax, and I just did a beautiful opening to OpenStax and what they were. Unfortunately, no one got to hear it except Joyce. So we will just know that it went well, and I shared what OpenStax was. If you want to contact me at any time, and I'll have my email at the end, but do know there are multiple ways you can get a hold of me for sure. So I'm going to let Joyce talk a little bit about XanEdu, and then we're going to get into struggling students and what we can do.
Outstanding. Thanks so much, Amy. And we'll also send the slides out so that you can get the OpenStax overview slides as well. So as I mentioned, I'm Joyce Mueller with XanEdu Publishing Services and Solutions. And Amy, I'm going to go through these fast so you can jump to the next slide. Our mission is really inspiring the education community. We know that you're very much focused on the art of teaching. So we want to inspire you with innovative solutions that enable you to customize your content. And at XanEdu, we've been around for a long time, and we're all about affordability and accessibility, which makes us really great partners with people like Amy Baldwin and with people like OpenStax as well. At the end of the day, of course, we're all about student success. So what do we do, and what are the resources for FYE leaders? We do traditional publishing and editorial content. We do a lot of FYE readers and compiled content. We do print and fulfillment, so a lot of students and people still really like to have that physical print book, but we also can do fulfillment via digital and via courseware. And then we're really focused on custom content, which is so important for FYE programs. We understand that every university, every school wants to have their own tone, their voice incorporated into these critical programs that are helping students transition to campus. A couple of other things that we do, we certainly are all about copyrights and permissions. And XanEdu started in the course pack business, so we still do that. It's a huge part of our business that ties into that copyright and permissions, digital and print, but we can also take that further and get into more custom publishing for you, whatever your needs might be. So the next slide, as I mentioned, we are all about affordability and accessibility for students. We're very committed to the OER community, OpenStax being an important partner. Our commitment, we're the preferred print partner for OpenStax. So anything physical typically goes through XanEdu. We're experts in customizing OER. So we can take a hybrid approach and have some paid content as well as some OER content, and it still keeps that price down. We work with a lot of folks to customize OER in a lot of different ways. And we also are one of the OpenStax Ally Tech partners. We have a full digital courseware solution that's affordable, as well as an e-reader that integrates with bookstores, with LMS systems, and all of those things. So we're really proud to be partnered with OpenStax and proud to bring this content to all of you. So I will stop and turn it back to Amy for the main program today.
Yeah. So just to get us started, if you don't mind putting the chat, and then Joyce, do you mind just checking the chat for me and pulling out some stuff so that I don't have to scroll up and down? But I'm just curious, what brought you here today? There are quite a few people that are on our webinar, which is fantastic. Probably because, like Joyce and I earlier, we're all struggling, not just our students, even us, even though the weather has been beautiful. But what challenges are you facing with supporting students who are struggling academically, and or what has brought you here today? So I'll give you just a little bit to shared that. What is it that's struggling? Joyce, you've heard me talk about my struggles. Can you imagine what in the middle of the semester we're struggling with right now? What do you think you're seeing?
A lot of students, you know, that first bad grade, or it could be, you know, writing at the college level that's very different. Working in groups with people that you haven't gone through high school with. So I think, and even just the, you know, making friends and loneliness and just a different, you don't know people as well as you did. So I think there's a lot of, am I cutting it? Am I doing the right things? There's a lot going on there. I think time management, reading comprehension, a lack of motivation, lots of things.
Yeah, you got them all, and you almost hit everything that is down in there. A lot of time management, engagement, motivation, just struggling socially. There are lots of things that are going on, and if you've worked in higher ed for longer than 5 years, you're going to agree with me. I hope that these things were happening before the pandemic, and they just were exacerbated for sure. So we're going to talk some about that. So glad to know that we're all in this together. We all are experiencing the same things. And Joyce, not being on a college campus, you did a great job of enumerating all of the things that we are facing. So what we're going to talk about today is what are some of the behaviors and habits that influence those student struggles. We're going to talk about failure as the learning process and kind of centering that. And I hope by the end of this, you'll embrace some of the concepts related to that. We're also going to then discuss some strategies for supporting students who struggle. And so as we get into the, what's going on, I want you to take a moment to think about your first year in college. And if your hometown newspaper had written a feature story about your first year, what would your headline be? So this is an activity that I do a lot with faculty development. And Joyce, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. Dan Friedman, if you're familiar with him at the University of South Carolina, he uses this as a kind of an opener. Think about what is the headline that would be a feature story of you. So Holly says, she survives. Idiot takes an F because he doesn't, I didn't get the rest of that. Sleepless students grades. Student spends every other week, oh boy, they're coming in fast. Every other week at another campus to avoid reality. Student unsure why she chose her major. Coming back from behind, oh, that's a good story. Lost and hopeless in Long Beach, freshman 15, a series of unfortunate events. So lots of struggle there, which is not unusual. And what I like about this kind of warm-up exercise, so to speak, is that it reminds us and kind of gets us in touch with the reality that we were not perfect students and that we had the same kinds of things going on. And that is really something that kind of helps ground us and hopefully provides us with opportunities to be empathetic to our students. So it is no surprise that all students are going to struggle during their college experience. And the first year in particular can be fraught with some of those adjustments, those struggles, those setbacks. But that's not always the case. And I usually like to talk about my two kids. They're not really kids anymore. They're more like young adults. But both of them struggled their junior year. More so than they did their other years. And so it is, something that's just part of the process. And if we're aware that students are going to struggle, and especially where they're going to struggle and why, I think we can do some things to help them with that. So what are some of those influences of that struggle? I challenged myself to kind of come up with a constellation of things that I've been hearing from students for years. And I'm just going to go clockwise, starting with the 12 o'clock right over the young woman's head. Mental health issues, and I would probably bet that a lot of your students are telling you that they're having some mental health issues, those definitely are integrated into some of these other things. And sometimes it's hard to tease out just and address just mental health issues. Social transitions, you already talked about having the students having social transition issues and adjustments. Big part of it as well, getting used to being around different people, having different networks. Our students have family issues. I have a student who this semester who has been out of class more than she's been in, and some of that has to do with family issues pulling her back out. So that's not unusual for certain campuses and for some student populations. Technology distractions. They're on their phone all the time, even when you ask them not to. They will admit that even if they can keep it under wraps in class, when they are outside of class, those technology distractions are really, really difficult for them to overcome. Imposter syndrome. They don't believe they should be here. They think everybody else has figured this out. That can affect them. Some of my students, especially the first year students, already have career concerns, but this also happens later in their academic career, junior, senior year, but they're concerned about picking a major, picking a career pathway that's going to help them make some money, give them some financial stability. A lot of you mentioned study skills, academic skills, definitely part of it. I'm putting in the hidden curriculum as well. If you are not familiar with the hidden curriculum or the unwritten rules of what the expectations are, and you haven't really shared that with students or you haven't had the opportunity to do it, that can be another barrier for student success. Just not knowing how to navigate the college experience. Learning differences, I'm thinking about ADHD, ADD, any other kinds of learning differences that might require some accommodation, or it might be that they had some accommodation in high school and they are not getting the kinds of things they need, or they have said they don't want any more accommodations. I have some students that do that. Financial pressures are really a big issue for my students. And even if they can pay all the bills, the concern about paying the bills in the future is part of the problem. And so they are definitely, thinking about these things. And I tell parents this all the time, even if your student is pretty stable and you've got things covered, they're still worried about, can I pay the bill? And then organizational skills. I taught today in class, I had 2 classes this morning about, we got 8 more weeks left. How are you going to organize your time? Because you're not doing it very well right now. And they still need coaching around that. I do want to just kind of put a little caveat to anything related to struggling students. We do know that we have students who struggle because of systemic barriers that we put in place as institutions, as society. And I'm not talking about those things. Those things do need to be dismantled. We do need to work to find ways to make a level playing field for all students. But I just want to be cognizant of the fact that there are going to be some things that are going to be difficult for us to have power to work around as individuals. But perhaps we can take some of these ideas back to our institution, our administration, our staff, our faculty, to find ways that we can have an impact on that. So I want to talk a little bit about learning. So we talked about struggles and what can affect them. And I'm not suggesting that I made the end-all be-all list of those struggles, but certainly enough there. I think that you probably have seen these kinds of things happen with your students. But I want to talk about kind of the learning process and kind of how to frame the struggles. So whenever we talk in my student success class about failure and struggles and adjustments and things like that, we do it with the language of learning. And what is learning? So that's one of the first things that we tackle after we talk a little bit about just hidden curriculum and things like that. So we talk about, learning is a chemical change in your brain. One of my colleagues, Dr. Sean Charlton, expressed it in this way that really made a lot of sense to me, and I like to share it with students. But it is the process by which you learn anything. There's got to be a little stimulus, and then there's a chemical change Of course, there's a lot more that goes on, but it is a change in your brain. And you can see from the graphic, this is something that I share with students. It is a neuron that whose dendrites get longer and more elaborate as you move from left to right. And I tell students that the learning process requires that you invest and put effort into the learning process. And that's the growing of the dendrites is the learning, is how it manifests in the brain. So there's a physiological response when you're learning anything. With that, and because we are moving a little quickly, what I'm going to do is share this or have Joyce share this in the recording and any other kinds of information that's going to be sent out afterwards, but I'll share this YouTube video with you there versus watching it here. But if you haven't seen this video, it's called What Does Learning Look Like? It's the clean version. It's bleeped out. So if you're concerned about showing it to students, you can grab this link in the email that comes out afterwards. And it is basically a youngish man, without a shirt on and a leather jacket, not sure what's going on there, learning how to do a certain trick on a skateboard. And one of the benefits of watching this is students can see that he tries and fails, struggles through the whole thing, and repeats the process over and over again until he finally gets it. And so that's a great opportunity then to talk to students about how struggle and failure is part of the learning process. I talk to my students about something called deliberate difficulty. And if you're not familiar with that term, you can write it down and look it up, or I can share some resources with you. But we talk about students often will not do the kind of work that they need to do in terms of studying or preparing, and without that deliberate difficulty, which means their brain has to work a little bit harder, they're not going to really be as prepared as they think they are. And so failure and struggle, not getting the answers right, practice testing yourself, trying the skateboard trick over and over again until you make some changes, is part of the process. And so if we can normalize that kind of language and information around learning, that struggle and failure is part of the process, then I hope what we can do is orient students to using that as information. One of the things that I said this week, I just gave midterm exams. Students often do very poorly on them. As Joyce said, that first grade, they didn't study what they needed to study. And I told them, I said, this is data. This is just data telling you something about how to do things differently. So learning process, failure, struggles, part of it. And then talking also about fixed and growth mindset. And if you're familiar with these terms, you'll probably find your students are as well. But what I like to share with students related to fixed and growth mindset is the part about failure and struggle. When they have a difficulty, if they have a fixed mindset, they shut down, they don't want to do it, they see it as a threat. When they have difficulty and they have a growth mindset, they see that as an opportunity to make changes. And failure is just feedback, kind of like what I shared with students. It's just data. If you have a fixed mindset, you think failure is final. And so pairing those two things, what does the learning process require of you? It does require setbacks, struggles, and failures. How do you approach learning? What is your mindset? Both of those things can be really, really helpful to students to kind of just set the stage for normalizing setbacks, failures, struggles, challenges as part of a process. And one of the things that I love about having this conversation with students is it can help them see that if they use that as information, it really is more instructive than successes are, because it gives us more information, it gives us more data, and hopefully we can come in and help them with the support needed for that as well. So some of the things to share with students, again, kind of laying the groundwork for that, is that when students struggle, it is normal. We go back to that first activity where I asked you to write your headline. Most of you had some struggle in your headline, and it means we all have experienced this, right? And so helping students understand that as part of the process, it's normal. Everybody has these moments. Another key piece of it is that setbacks, struggles, and failures are temporary. They are not, and that's another thing I said to students about their midterm grades. It is data. It is not an indication of your self-worth. It is not an indication of your potential. It is just a point in time that can be changed. You can move forward and improve and get better at things. But it is definitely necessary for learning. My students are not going to believe me, and if I'd love to hear in chat if you're in this situation too. I teach student success. I talk about the strategies that they have to do in order to be successful on tests, be successful on assignments. They don't do them. They take a test, and then they get that information. Oh, okay, I got to do some things differently. Sometimes they have to have that experience to believe me that what I'm saying is true. And one of probably the most important things that I want you to think about too is improvement may take longer than 15-week semester. It may take longer than that 1 week, hey, you need to get your act together and I want to see things improve next week. It may take longer for students, and that's okay. Unfortunately, we're set up as institutions to take snapshots at 15 weeks. We turn in grades. If they're not where they need to be, they get put on a permanent record. But hopefully students have ability to make some changes the next semester, make some improvements, and maybe improve that GPA or get off probation or things like that. So one of the things that I want to talk about is just what can we do? And I had that little disclaimer, there are some things we cannot do, but there are some things we can. And that's where I want to kind of put the last 10 minutes of our discussion today about. One is creating a culture of support on your campus. Have you normalized struggle, failures, and setbacks? Or is it something not to be ashamed of, to hide behind? One of the things that we did at our institution several years ago, and in fact, last week was our Fail Forward week. I didn't capture any new pictures, but I'll show you a couple of examples. We decided, based on some of the research that we saw about normalizing failures, that we wanted to share with students the opportunity to let them talk about, think about, and study failure. And so we have something called Fail Forward Week. It happens about week 6, week 7. I think week 7 is where we were this year. And we celebrate those failures. We ask students to share, what did they do well, what did they not, what did they do wrong, what did they learn from it? And it was really kind of inspired by some other institutions that have done this and do it kind of well. And what I like about this is it has a community angle to it. Like everybody gets to see, these anonymous kind of, different examples of different experiences. So in this particular one that happened a couple of years ago, I failed my bio test because I thought I knew the stuff from senior year. From now on, don't get too cocky. So again, they shared their experience, then they shared kind of what they learned about it. And so just a great way to kind of get students talking about it, thinking about that struggle and that failure, and realizing that it's pretty normal as well. Another strategy is identifying crises of confidence. Now, if you were able to listen to Bryce Bunting last week, if not, I'm sure you will be able to find a recording, or we can get Joyce and her team to send out a reminder of where that recording is. Bryce shared with you all kind of a roller coaster in terms of the first year or the first semester of a college student's experience. And if you think about that roller coaster, you know, where are those dips, where are those times where students are going to feel like, you know, things are sinking a bit. The literature around that, David Yeager is someone who has done some research around that. He calls it crises of confidence. Where is it in the semester or in a program that they're going to feel a lack of confidence? So if you already know that about your students, you already know that they're going to feel this way, perhaps because of this event, then that could be a great opportunity to A, identify it, and B, share strategies around how to get through it. And I'll give you a couple of examples in our institution. One is we have a college algebra class. We all know college algebra is you know, well known for being like the death knell for a lot of students. They lack confidence in it. They're not good at math, they say. Of course, that's fixed mindset. And in our college algebra course in particular, the second test is a doozy. First test is review. They do well on it. Second test is new material. They don't do as well. And students will need to know that. They also need to know how to combat it. And so we have coached our faculty to, once they realize they had data, that the second test is always the one that students dip in grades, to start coaching them before that test. And that has allowed them to see ahead, not be surprised, and also prepare for it. Another place of crises of confidence, I know Yeager talks predominantly about academic crises of confidence, but I kind of sort of joke with my students, it's not really a joke, that the third week of the semester is boyfriend-girlfriend breakup week or significant other breakup week. And we talk about that as well, that this is very normal. You may feel a crisis of confidence that somebody just dumped you. And what kind of resources do we have that you could engage that would be helpful to you? So just be mindful of where in your institution's experience. Again, it could be a course, it could be a particular semester, it could be a particular program that you offer where students struggle at a certain point, and helping them with that can be very, very helpful. Again, if you listened to Bryce last week, and by the way, if you get a chance to listen to the recording, if you didn't hear him live, he's fantastic. He shared this as well in terms of belonging, and it is something that my institution has used as part of an orientation to the first year. And it is basically something any institution can do, and quite frankly, any faculty or any advisor could do. And it's simple. You provide students with a story of, it could be a real student at your institution, those are always best, or it could be a conglomeration of typical students. And you just share with that student that story. You know, this in particular is a student who was excited, but she was also nervous and worried. She got to campus and she didn't feel like she fit in. And then she realized, oh, I've got to do some things a little bit differently. And she also realized that everybody feels that way. So great if you can capture real student stories. Ask upperclassmen to share their stories of setbacks and comebacks, and then give that to students who are coming in for their first year so that they will see, hey, these people don't have it all figured out. They weren't born knowing this. They also went through a process that I'm having to go through as well. And Nathan, I see your question. I'll come back to it in just a minute, but thank you for that. Another piece of this in terms of supporting students who are struggling, if you have the ability, you're a faculty member or you're a program coordinator, if you can require campus resource use in some way, shape, or form, then build it into assignments, build it into program requirements. We have a program, a probation, an early alert and probation program, where students are required to see a peer coach. In some cases, they're required to put together an academic plan. What are they going to do to make improvements with their grades? And those kinds of things can be incredibly important for students who are struggling. Again, it's normalizing the asking for help, getting help seeking behaviors. Students don't do optional. So requiring it and making it necessary for another step. In our probation program, students can't register for the next semester unless they have done the things that we require of them. And again, we know these things help them. We know that these things contribute to their success. Requiring them should be part of our common practice, and it's not always common at all. This one, again, is another one that I'm bringing out of an academic setting, but you could do this in any kind of strategy. You could do it as a coach, as an advisor, as a peer mentor, as just staff who have interactions with students who are struggling. And it is a reflection opportunity. I actually just did this in my classes this morning. And I was going to share with you some of the things that they wrote about. But it is basically asking students to review what they did when they struggled, analyze it. And in this case, this is a test autopsy. I like to call it a test autopsy. I have a colleague that doesn't like that word autopsy, but it seems fitting. And they have to identify why they got things right and why they got them wrong. Again, it's just building some self-awareness, helping them see the results of what they're doing. And it is allowing them an opportunity to think a little differently about what they should be doing next time. And to me, when students struggle, this is what it's all about. They've got to improve their self-awareness, and they've got to couple that with new strategies. Doesn't always happen, but those two things are really important. You can do a test autopsy, which I did. I did actually both of these this morning, and then asking them just reflection questions. And again, if you're doing some one-on-ones with people, you don't have a class that you're teaching, you could just ask them, how'd you feel about that assignment? How are you feeling about, how you're doing in class? How are you feeling about being able to pay for college next semester? What is it that you're struggling with? What do you need more help with? What do you wish you could do differently? And I wanted to share with you a couple of students' responses to that last question. I asked them kind of what did they learn about themselves in the process. One student said, I learned that I have a lot more study practicing to do. She didn't do well on the midterm. And I need to learn how to effectively use my time when I make a schedule. I also think I could spend more time taking the test and really reading what the question is asking me. She got a lot out of that activity. One is she realized her time management's not that great. Her study strategies are not that great. And her test taking strategies are not that great. And of course, we covered how to make improvements for that. I'll read one more. I learned that college is not like high school. We've been talking about this for 7 weeks, and I'm so glad that they're finally having that epiphany. I can't cram the night before or memorize answers, which I actually like because I feel like I actually learn now instead of just remembering for a test, but forgetting afterwards. I learned that notes don't always help, but they benefit when they're good notes, and I like practice tests. This particular student, we talked a lot about the notes she took were just perfunctory and were not really, done with a purpose to help her. So now she knows how to do things a little differently. One of the last things that I wanted to share with you in terms of helping students struggle has to do with how we give feedback. So I shared with you that whenever I gave the test back, am I disappointed with the grades? Oh, I'm always disappointed because I want students to do really well. But I wanted to also temper what I was saying so that there was no shame around it, because again, I'm trying to normalize the struggle. not in a way that I like just assume they're not going to do well, but just to say, hey, this happens, let's use this information to make some changes moving forward. And really thinking about how we articulate that, I think, is really important. And also, it is something we have control over, right? How we address students in terms of their struggle can be incredibly helpful to them if we want them to make a change. So I'm sharing with you a little bit of research around, it's actually around stereotype threat, and it is initially Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat, but this particular information comes from Cohen, Ross, and Steele, and it's called wise criticism. And it is very specific in terms of how you give criticism or feedback when students aren't doing well. And what you say is, I'm giving you this criticism because I have very high expectations and I know you can reach them. So it's showing that expectation is high, and then showing also that you believe that the student can get there. So another example is, the bar is high, but you can rise over it. So instead of telling students that, well, maybe you're not college ready, maybe, this isn't for you, to say, hey, you didn't meet these expectations just yet. They are high because this is college and I need you to get up to that point because you're going to have to build beyond that. But I believe you can do it. And those kinds of statements to students actually can help them not internalize any shame, but look at the process a little differently. And some of the research has indicated that it lessens the effect of stereotype threat for students. So those students who are minoritized populations who may feel left out or feel other are going to feel more included and be more eager to make some changes. They saw whenever they did this study that increased the likelihood that students revised or put in additional work, and then it definitely decreased the achievement gap for those minoritized students. So that is a lot. I went through a lot in a little bit at a time, but I just want to give some of the takeaways at the end, and then we can try to answer the questions that you all have added to the chat. And so I noticed, Joyce, they seem very chatty. Is that true? It looked like they shared a lot.
There's been a lot of great comments in the chat. Definitely some shout outs for college success. And I know Nathan had the first question, but I've got a couple other questions that have been coming from the chat. So keep that coming in.
Okay, so to wrap it all up, what can we do about students who are struggling? I think first of all, we need to teach them it is part of the learning process. They do not have to do things perfectly. They shouldn't do things perfectly. They should learn from those mistakes. One of the big things that I have tried to incorporate just kind of informally is sharing past my own struggles. What was it like? I did this today. I talked about, and I've shared this before with them. I said, I went into a test one time thinking that I did fairly well, like made a B, and I made a 57. What does that tell you about my study strategies? And, they'll say, you didn't study appropriately. And I go, absolutely. And I thought I did. So that tells me that there was something I needed to change. And then I tell them that that's when I got a study buddy and he saved my life. A shout out to Wayne Jones, Dr. Wayne Jones, that is, who helped me through statistics. Discuss those crisis points, normalize the ups and downs, because that's going to be important to helping them be aware that they're coming and that they have strategies and resources. Emphasize that it is temporary. Find ways to engage students in that reflection piece. Get them to talk about what happened, what would they do differently. And if you have student stories that you can share, you have students that you've had in past semesters who are willing to share what worked for them, what didn't. And definitely, if you can create an environment where that struggle and that failure is normal, kind of like Joyce and I did when we came on after the beautiful intro that I did to OpenStax, and then realized, oh, we're not any, maybe we started the webinar, can lessen the intensity and make people feel more at home, feel, more supported in that. So, Joyce, what were some of the questions that you saw in there? And I will be glad to start with Nathan. So Nathan says, how to address the fear of failure. So I think just talking about it, what happens whenever you fear it? What could you do differently? How could you improve your attitude towards it? Or also give them opportunities to do something that's very low stakes that they could fail, can be another piece of it. And Nathan asked, how long is the student success course and is it mandatory? Great question. Mine is a 3-credit-hour course. It runs 15 weeks. It is required for all students who need a transitional course, which means a developmental course like developmental math, developmental reading. We have had different iterations of requirements, and it has been in the past open to any student that wants to take it, required for a certain population. We've had to make a little bit of change on that for sure. So it looks like Joyce froze up on me. I don't know.
Yep, I went off camera, so if you can still hear me, a couple of the questions that kind of came up as we were monitoring. One was, how do you get faculty involved? So some faculty are not as into being involved in some of these early warning things. So any advice on how to get other faculty involved in some of these early warning, early interventions supporting students?
I think one of the things, so I'm assuming that the context here is that students faculty are not necessarily putting this kind of effort in. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm reading in, but yes.
Okay. I think some of it is faculty training and letting them see that this is part of a learning process, and if used well, can help students actually make improvements and feel better about themselves and kind of embrace it. So faculty training, faculty onboarding in some way, shape, or form, really, really important. I'm a big believer in trying to incentivizing those things rather than making them mandatory, but in some cases, some institutions might need to say, I need everybody submitting progress reports, and I hate punitive kind of stick kind of things. It'd be better if we had some carrots. But one way to do that is to have a case study where a student got an early warning, got some help, got what they needed, and then were able to pull out and be successful. And sometimes those kinds of stories show faculty that it can be done. And even if it doesn't work for every student, saving 2 or 3 students could be really helpful.
That's great.
I noticed.
Well, yeah,
there jump in?
Popped up.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I saw Kimberly's come up. When I say success stories, the setback comes in. Where do you get them? Where do you get student success stories? I ask for them from students. When we were putting our orientation together, we did a conglomeration of them. So what is it that students often tell us that they're struggling with and how they solved it? But I have found past students, sophomores who are getting it and who are working it, they love to record, and I've had them do that too. Just Zoom record. What did you mess up on? How did you make a change? What was the result? And see if you can get a few peer mentors, tutors can do this. If you've got upperclassmen on campus in kind of a captive audience, you certainly can grab that, but you will have to ask for them. If they don't want to do video, you could probably send out also a Google form and ask them to share. But I've found that most students are, especially when they're doing well, they like to kind of share, that. So what else did you see, Joyce?
There were a lot of comments about, well, my course is only 8 weeks long. My course is only 10 weeks long. So getting into that, failing fast and things like that, what kind of advice would you have for folks that have really short courses to give that students those lived experiences of failing but not completely screwing up their grades?
Yeah, I think if you can orchestrate a complicated task, So sometimes it can be like a chapter test, a real, real down and dirty chapter test or quiz or something where you can replicate an experience that they're going to have maybe in a larger way, and do that early and have them do the preparation that they normally do. Say, we've got a quiz next week. I want you to prepare like you would normally prepare. Make it challenging and give it to them. And then if they don't do well on it, which could be possible, then you use that as an opportunity to have them reflect, and analyze. I give them a midterm test. I give them enough other extra credit that if they bomb the midterm test, it will never devastate their grade. So, but I have to give them a midterm test that feels like a real test, or they won't do the things that I want them to do, which is prepare how we told you to prepare, see how it works, kind of thing. But you could do that on a small scale for sure.
That's fantastic. And then I think the last question is, how do you teach against there's a culture? The success is good and failing is bad, and that's just kind of a pervasive cultural thing. That is an opportunity.
Yeah. One of the things what I would suggest doing, and this is kind of how this seed germinated with me, is I had a student at another institution. I was doing a faculty workshop, and I won't tell you all the details. It was kind of an interesting thing. He ended up being my shuttle driver. And he told me that, because I said, what is the one thing that you want the faculty at this institution to know and about student success? And he told me, I wish you all would stop focusing on success, because I failed out my first year. And I now realize that failure was instructive to me and helped me. And I wish you all would, I wish you would share with, it was very, very specific. I wish you would share with faculty that failure can be helpful too. And I think if you have a culture in which failure is not seen as normal and part of the process, sometimes letting students share that can be much more persuasive than somebody like me telling my colleagues, hey, we need to stop doing this. Oftentimes the student stories and how those kinds of experiences have helped them can be quite good.
That's really insightful. I think we're the XanEdu team, we're putting together some workshops on that we'll be doing as part of the FYE conference and following up from that. And how to share this with faculty seems like a great thing to share expertise across our colleagues. So with that, we're about 3 minutes from the top of the hour. So Amy, I will turn off the Q&A, and thanks everyone for your patience. We will send out the recording and the slides after this, but Amy, I will let you wrap it up with any closing words.
Yeah, sure. I just appreciate all the conversation and the thoughts and ideas. If you want to reach out to me, if you've got other questions or want to share, I just appreciate that you're here thinking about this, knowing that students need some help and support. And so I'm hoping that just the fact that you are already attuned to the struggling students will mean that they will find a soft spot to land with you and get the help that they need. It is not easy work. It is very frustrating. If I did this webinar last week, I would have had a totally different tone because I was burned out. But I also, realize that that's a part of the process as well, as we, have to keep plugging away, keep trying, keep doing the things till we find out what works for our students.
That's fantastic. Well, everybody, I hope you have a great afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.